Hello everybody and welcome. We are doing some BMW content today. So if you're new to the channel and you found it because you're searching for how to do this particular job on your BMW, welcome. If you're an OG subscriber and you're looking for some Miata content, not today, but stay tuned. We're going to have some more Turbo Miata stuff coming up very, very soon. And if you're interested in a completely DIY, no kits build of a turbo on a Miata, which applies to many other cars, take a look at the videos. I'll leave a link up above. But moving on, today we're going to be working on the front suspension of my BMW e90 335i. Now, I took my BMW in recently for some recall work, getting the airbag recall done. I know it's late. It's been very delayed, but I got it done. That's better than nothing. And of course they did their complimentary inspection where they do a big list of things that they recommend should be done to the car. So this is a 2007. It's now getting fairly up there in years, and a lot of stuff came back. But really most of the things I had either already done and they just didn't have record of, or there were things that I can stand to wait on. For example, front tires. You know, I've got a good 6 months worth of tread left in those tires. It's fine. But the one thing that was sort of an issue that I had noticed was the front suspension. I'm getting some vibration, especially at high speed on the highway, from the front suspension that basically indicates that the bushings are going. Now, like many cars, the BMW is no different in that it's almost as cost effective to replace the entire arm than it is to try to buy the bushing, press it out with a press, put it back in, all that kind of stuff. You can buy the whole bushing, the whole arm with bushing installed and ball joint on the other side installed for just a little bit more than the whole thing, and you can save yourself a lot of effort. So I do recommend that way. So what does this mean? We've got, ta-da, the only one of these was indicated as being an issue with a really excessive vibration possible. However, it is sort of a recommendation to do both in pairs and on both sides. So these are the items that you'll need, which I'll leave some links to do this job. And you've got this set for each side, and we're going to see what's involved with how to get the old ones out, how to get the new ones in, and how to get them installed properly and torqued down. There's some tips and tricks. Stay tuned. Alright, so we're going to be working at the front of the car, but just for safety, I'm going to chalk off the wheels here. You can also leave your emergency brake on and the car in gear. And what I like to do is, especially if you have the sports suspension package, roll up on like a 2x10 here that I've made a little ramp out of right there. So it gives me a little bit of extra clearance, and I can get my jack under there. So we'll use the central lifting point for the jack, and we'll lift up the car and get the front end off the air and get some jack stands under the front jack stand points behind the front tires. If you're working with just hand tools, you may want to loosen your lugs before you raise the car. And also before you raise the car, you may want to check your ride height. Now, the reason this is done is because later on we're going to need to torque the all the bolts down for the suspension components with the suspension under load. And what that does is it ensures that the bushing is not twisted incorrectly. If you were to torque it down with it not in load, that bushing would twist as it came down off your jack and went under load. So what we're going to do is we're just going to measure here from the center, and on mine it's basically right at 14.5 from the center. There are some specs for measuring from the bottom of the hub, and if you measure from that, it's about 18 3/4. However, if you have the sports suspension, and the reason why I'm measuring from the center of the hub is because different suspension packages may be different specs. So like mine, for example, is about 17 point something if measured from the bottom of the hub. So I'm just measuring from the center here, and I can measure from the center cap with the wheels off, and it'll be pretty easy. So I just know to go to 14.5 up here, and I'll know that my wheel is and suspension is under compression. All right, give yourself plenty of room on the jacks, and if your plastic things aren't totally tweaked like mine, you may want to use a little rubber protector unit that slots in there. These are somewhat inexpensive, but if you don't even want to pay that, you can take a hockey puck and make your own. But mine are pretty tweaked, so I don't really care these days. So give yourself plenty of room here. All right, so we're gonna need to get this whole under tray off, and what I like to do is leave the jack here normally, but I'll get that out of the way for the under tray. But before we work on that, I like to give it a little bit of a dose of some PB Blaster on these bolts. They don't look too bad, not corroded at all, and just a little dusty, but a little penetrating fluid does wonders in helping to get this out. So what we're looking at is, here is one of them. Follow that down to where the ball joint enters the knuckle, and then the same on this one towards the rear. So we got a bolt there, and back up under here. You can just spray it in back there, and the same over here. The nut is on the opposite side. So we'll get in there with a little fluid right there, and you can, there we go. Taking off the under tray is easy, but a little tedious. A electric ratchet like this makes the job a little bit easier. And so on, and repeat 1 million more times. So here's what we're looking at. We've got this ball joint, and this is the upper thrust arm. It's the one that's more in front. And this side connects into the main part of the frame in the front. And what we've got is, I lost it, a 21 for this guy. This is the nut. This is the new nut that I'm going to be putting on. These are self-locking nuts, and they're single use. And you can see it's a nylock in there. If I can get it to focus. And you'll want to replace those each time. I'm replacing this, which goes on this end as well. And on that side, we're going to have an 18. So we've got our 18s. And then what we're going to try to do is, I have an impact gun. Sometimes you can just whiz these off without the ball joint bolt spinning. As you can see, there's nothing to hold it on the bottom. But they have included a little Torx. They have included a little Torx thing, which is a T40, which we can slot in just like this and use an open-ended wrench, or actually you can slide a closed-end wrench on there if you want to keep moving this guy, but an open end would do it as well to keep that from spinning. Another technique is to simply jack up on this to apply some pressure on kind of the bottom of this, and if this is on the way out anyway, there's not a lot of grease or packing in there, so it will stop it from spinning. Now, how do you know that this is actually bad? Well, I got it diagnosed by a BMW mechanic, but if you don't trust them, you can do this yourself. If you jack up the car and get to this point, you don't even need to remove the under tray, but you can just basically reach up here and see what the play is. I'm just rotating this with my wrist, and you can see it's going back and forth quite a bit. If you think about it, with the entire weight of the car behind it and this wheel going up and down based on the vibration on the road, you can see how this would not be a stable driving experience. And so you'll feel vibration through the whole body of the car, which is what I'm feeling. So it looks like this side is a little bit more tweaked than the actual ball joint, but replacing it should fix this. So yeah, an impact will make short work of this. For the last few threads, you will need to probably use your Torx, so you want to have that tool on hand. And then the 18 over here, got this free, so now we can just work this out and it will come free. So now you can line that up and make sure everything looks good in the same way. And it pretty much does, and we can get the new one in there. Now with this out, it might free up a little bit of room to access this one, and so we may do that. But before we start on the nuts, we want to remove this clip which binds up here, this link. So we'll want to get this off. And that will require just a screwdriver to poke in here to release the clip. Alright, for the lower control arm, you're going to have this little clip if you're equipped with the xenon lights with the self-leveling sensor attached. So this little clip controls the bottom arm, and it levels the lights automatically as your suspension goes up and down to be level with the road, not your car. So you're not blinding oncoming drivers. And I'm trying to get this on film how to get this clip off without damaging it, because it is a little delicate. So basically you put pliers on either side. You're going to give it a squeeze, lift up on that little tab, and then you're going to push back on it with a flathead screwdriver to release, and then you'll be able to release the pliers and it should pop out. I'm not pushing with the screwdriver because I don't have too many hands, and I couldn't get my tripod in here to film this. So that's the process of getting this off. This is a good point to actually inspect the mechanism, which is right here, this little in-link looking thing, and see that anything's corroded. This is the actual sensor. It's on a bracket, the bracket will come off when you unbolt this control arm. So you want to make sure that it's not just going to dangle or possibly mess up this connector. You can take this whole thing out if you need to, but we can just unclip this, get this out, and reclip it once we get the new one in. Alright, so once your leveling sensor is off, you can start taking this apart. And what I did was, to break it loose, I used an air tool, but you still might have some difficulty in getting this off. And one thing that can help with this is to apply some pressure from the bottom to keep this from spinning. And so I just jacked up a piece of wood and applied some pressure. When you get to the final part, it's going to spin regardless, and so what you want to do is get your Torx back out and use that only to hold the shaft still. You may be tempted to use it to actually spin the whole bolt, but you really don't want to do that because the Torx is not very strong, and it may strip out if you do it that way. So what you want to do is just hold it still with the Torx driver, and then rotate the nut with your wrench. An open-ended wrench will work. Then you can get that out. Alright, so once that's there, I've also loosened up this. Haven't taken it out all the way, but that'll be the next step, and then we can put in the new one. Alright, so here's my setup. I've got two box-end wrenches, 18 millimeters on that bolt. You don't have enough room on either side. It looks like there's kind of room here, but there's really not. To get a tool in there, an air tool or a power tool, and you can break it loose by hand. It's not too bad. I think the Torx setting is about 77 is what these are. So they shouldn't be too bad. Like I said before, letting them soak for a little while in some penetrating fluid will help with this. Alright, with this bolt out, you'll notice that there's a couple tabs down here. It doesn't just drop out. It needs to come out sideways. So this is meant to be a rather tight fit. So what you want to do is grab yourself a dead blow hammer and give it a few taps. There we go. Whoa! So I dropped my camera and it's out. So then we're gonna get the new one in here. You can inspect all this for any kind of corrosion or anything like that. And we should be good. Once again, comparing the two, I like to put my bolts back together just so I know which bolt goes with which nut. And if you look at this is like very loose. On the car, you couldn't really detect much play, but you can tell that this is a lot looser than the new one. So, out with the old, in with the new. Alright, the upper, sometimes known as thrust arm or tension strut, is in, And what we've done is just jacked up the hub up to the appropriate height that I measured before, which is about 14.5 inches from the center line to the fender. And then we can torque down the bushing ends. Now what's important is torquing it while it's under load, the end with the bushing, which is this side, and then the inner side over on the other one. The ball joint side doesn't really bind, so that can be torqued down at any time, but you can just do it all at the same time if you want. All right, all set. Now, before you get the wheel back on this side, you may want to clean off the caliper if you've been repositioning it around like I have. Get rid of some of these, greasy stains. Don't want that contaminating your brake pads. But other than that, it's the same process on the other side. The only thing that's different is you don't have to deal with the annoyance of that little clip for the headlight leveling sensor. So let's get that done and then we'll get it down. Another option for the final torque down is to use some ramps or blocks, wooden blocks, something like this. I realized that on the other side of my garage I don't have enough space for my jack to really get into the right position. So you basically lower it down like that, and there is just enough room to get under there. Remember, it's only the bushing side that needs to be under load when you tighten it. So it's just like hand tight right now, and I'll get under there and tighten the other side. Hey everybody, it's about a week later actually, some time has passed, and I wanted to give you an update on why I waited. So I got all my suspension components changed, as you saw. However, when I got back from an initial test drive, I was still getting sort of a kind of a weird lumpy feeling. Now definitely the high vibration type of feeling that I was getting was gone. So basically the bushing change and the control arm change fixed that. However, I was still getting that weirdness, and I wanted to figure out what it was, give the final diagnosis and results before posting this video. So I delayed the post of the video to do that. So let's take a look at a couple of the troubleshooting steps I took and what the actual end resolution was for that last little piece. All right, so what did I check? So like I said, it was kind of like a lumpy feeling almost going around. And honestly, it felt coming from the front, but we'll talk about that in a second. So what I did was jack up each corner and double check for play. You want to check for play kind of left and right like this, and kind of fore and aft, kind of like this. And that just tests on the rear suspension. It's basically just connecting it's testing the control arms and the wheel hub. And you also want to spin it and just listen for any sounds. If you hear a grinding noise or anything like that, that's not the brake noise, more than just the calipers lightly dragging on the brakes, then you might have a problem with the wheel bearing, and that might be the cause of the problem. And then also on the front, when you do that, you're checking the tie rods. I only replaced the control arms and bushings, not the tie rods. They look okay, because I did this test before and there seemed to be no problem. So continued to be no problems. The next thing I did was angle the wheels straight, not like this, but with it up in the air, you take I'll do it on this one. Basically, you want to take something that's like a flat edge and kind of put it very, very close to the rim. Not the tire, because the tire can potentially have some little variances, but the rim should be steady. And what you want to do is just rotate the tire in either direction and watch the gap. Make sure that the gap stays consistent. If you've got any kind of wobble there, then that's indicative of a problem. Now, since none of this revealed any problems, at that point, my suspicion was that it was a balance issue. So I started looking around, see if I'd lost any wheel weights and everything. And although the feeling of lumpiness seemed to come from the front, what actually was the problem was the rear. It was actually the other side rear. Can't really get a good shot of that because it's in direct sun, but when I looked at the tire itself, looked at the treads, looked at the sidewall. When I got under, stuck my head back there and looked on the other sidewall, the tread right here was starting to separate about this much. And so yeah, it was kind of a balance issue. When it starts to separate that, it throws the balance off. So, but not the balance issue that you normally correct with like a wheel balancer at the tire shop. So once I saw that, I was like, and these tires were kind of old. So took it in immediately and got the tires replaced. Boom, problem solved. So now all the suspension components are working as they should. I highly recommend this update. If you're like me and you're sitting at 90,000 miles, 100,000 miles, something like that or above, and this has never been done, it really tightens up the steering response and just the overall feeling of the car back to the way it was intended. So although I could feel it being better after replacing the control arms with bushings, that problem in the back was causing it to not feel completely right. So I wasn't getting the full effect. But I can wholeheartedly recommend this upgrade. It tightens everything up and you will have a great driving experience. So that'll be it for today. Thanks for your patience in waiting. I know you don't know exactly when I was filming this, but it's been over a week since I filmed the rest of it. Anyway, I'll be doing some more BMW content. We're probably planning some upgrades soon, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.